Thank you very much. Very excited to be here. So raise your hand if you were born after 1980. So quite a few people in the room. So you fall into that first part up there. You're millennials. Now, one of the things that I'll be talking about through here is that millennials as a general connotation doesn't mean everybody, but it's kind of a label that has been put out there, and there's some good and bad about millennials. But I'll tell you one thing, this topic, we could talk about this all day, and we could go round and round and have great conversations about it. So I'm going to try and share a little bit with you in about the next 15 or 20 minutes as an introduction. But for you all, with what you do, having personal skills and understanding the behavior of the clients is even more important than it was when I was buying my first house. Because of the way that they interact, you don't sell to them anymore. There's a lot of different ways that you have to communicate with them. There's a lot of different ways that they get information. So it's a lot more challenging. So you understanding their behavior and their lack of some personal skills, as well as potentially helping build up some of yours, is what's going to help you to be successful. I want to see how many of you might have seen this video.
Amy, it says you are trained in technology. That's very good. Are you adept at Excel?
No.
PowerPoint?
No.
Publisher?
Not really.
Exactly in what area of technology are you proficient?
Snapchat, Pinterest, Instagram, Vine, Twitter. You know, the big ones.
I'm surprised you didn't say Facebook.
That's for old people, like my parents. That's funny.
Well, Amy, when you're working for me, you have to have those kind of research skills, because I'll send you things for you to comb through and get the answers and send them to me. So for that, you've got to be really good at technology.
For stuff like that, no problem. I'll just ask Siri.
You'll just ask Siri?
You know, Siri tell me this, Siri find me that. We're all good getting you the answers.
Tell Siri I want you ready to go at 8 sharp each and every morning.
I don't understand.
What don't you understand?
What you just said.
You don't understand be ready to go?
No. You said 8, right?
Yes.
8 like in the morning 8?
Yes, in the morning.
Yeah. That kind of doesn't work for me. Who gets up at 8?
I do.
I Skype with my French boyfriend in Paris until like 3 in the morning. I don't even get to Starbucks until like 10, where I order my grande chai tea latte, 3 pumps, skim milk, light water, 2% foam, extra hot, but not too hot. So if it's okay, I work best in the morning at 10:45.
Wow. Amy, I don't think we're going to be a good fit.
Why are you so negative? I can sense your hostilities, and right now I am not feeling very safe. I've been here for over 5 minutes, and the only nice thing you have said to me was nice resume, which I typed all night for this meeting with you. You've given me no guidance, no validation, no encouragement, no supervision. Is there an HR director somewhere?
HR director?
Yes, I need to speak to someone. I may have to take off today as a mental health day.
Take the day off. Amy, look at me. You don't work here.
Are you firing me?
Okay, yes.
Had any of you seen that video before? Might have heard about it. You might think on its face, on the surface, that that is not something that actually happens, but I speak all the time on the inability for young men and women that are coming out of college or that have been out of college for the last 5 or 10 years, that they don't have the basic skills to interview. And that's one of the things that is going on in our society, which makes your job that much more difficult. So I saw you've got a course coming up in October on how to market to millennials and eventually to Generation Z. That's going to be very, very powerful for y'all. But what I'm talking about today is the front end, how you focus on making sure you have those personal skills and the ability to relate with them so that you can communicate with them and get them to understand who you are. So millennials, that's why I asked anybody after 1980, So just so you know, millennials are also Generation Y, so it went baby boomers, Generation X, Generation Y, and now we've got Generation Z, anybody born after 1995. And they're going to be your next set of home buyers, okay? Generation Z is actually going to be the largest generation here soon, but right now, Generation Y, the millennials, are the largest. They multitask. So I've got a 26-year-old who is barely a millennial, but that's what she does. She doesn't watch TV, but she's got her iPad, she's got her phone, and she's watching sports and all different types of things at the same time. They're very tech savvy. Not like Generation Z, but they're still very tech savvy. Now, one of the things that you might have noticed, because I notice when I go into different companies, is this tech savvy piece is transcending across all generations. I walk into restaurants today, and it doesn't matter what the age the individual is, they're all on their phones. They're not having conversations. They're not exploring information about each other. A lot of millennials are browsers. Do you guys find that when they're out looking at houses that they're browsing? I've got Ryan, right? Yep. Shaking your head. Give me an example of what you've seen.
I'm a lender, so
okay.
They'll call and say, how much house can I afford? And then I'll say, well, fill out an application and we can get started. They say, well, no, my credit score is about this and I make about that. Can you tell me just with that information? No, I mean, I can tell you based on that information, but probably that information is inaccurate.
Right.
So they do a lot of kicking because they went to Rocket Mortgage or wherever else. Brian probably can relate, but they've got, and then when you tell them that, what's your average rate? Oh, well, it's this. Well, online it said it was this. It's like, yeah, well, you got to be a farmer from Omaha living in Hawaii for that. So anyway.
Do you also find then that there's a term out there now called ghosting? Do you also find that they ghost you a lot? Yes. So that's something that you have to deal with, and that's part of how to figure out how to communicate with them. But they're into the social media. It's becoming more and more of a trend. We'll talk about that in another second. But they are confident. Why do you think they're confident? I call it a false confidence.
Because they have the answer in their pocket.
Well, so that's part of the technology, and we get into that into a second as well. But this generation was not brought up by parents that gave them a lot of responsibility, and they were not allowed to fail. Some of you may have or may not have experienced that. I, as a parent, I've got a couple millennials, and I make sure that when they fail, they know they failed, right? But what we find, and what research shows, and actually the statistics shows, is that parents are calling colleges on behalf of their kids. Parents are going on job interviews with their kids. So this is because there's a false confidence out there. What's that?
You said, are you serious?
It absolutely is. It absolutely, and it.
I'm 26 years old, and for me to hear something like this is just ridiculous.
Well, and
if I had to take my parent on a job interview,
absolutely.
I think I'd be shamed for life and never come out of a hole.
But the parents, many of the parents, and it's not all, it's about 82% out there we're seeing, is the kids have never had or been given the responsibility when they failed at something. They've always been told you can do whatever you want. There's participation trophies. If you look at schools today, you can retake a test 3 times to pass it, so you don't fail out for failing a test. So there's false confidence. So that generates, when you have a conversation with millennials, the fact that you may want to tell them something, but they already know what they want. So that's why one of the things I'm going to talk about here in a second is an important trait for you all to use. They are problem solvers, so to Ryan's point, they've got a piece, technology right in front of them that I didn't have when I was their age. So if there's something they want to find out, they go find it. But what's the problem with that? So what's in the news today? Fake news, right? You see that all the time. So it's not just millennials, it's baby boomers. It's Generation X, Generation Y, and Generation Z. They go on and they look at something on their phone or their tablet or their computer, and the first thing that pops up, that now becomes their fact. And they don't do any research. They don't have the personal skills to be able to do critical thinking to realize that just doesn't make sense. I've got to go look somewhere else to see if this is important or not. They do seek advice, but usually from their peers. They're the group that is the most frank. People my age, we were taught by our parents, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all, right? This generation, that's not what they portray when they're out there. But they do at least pretend or talk about that they're a very transparent generation. So the other generation that you will be seeing out there as new home buyers, anybody born after 1995, is Generation Z. Now that video that we had of the young lady doing the interview, she's more of a Generation Z. But what is complicating all of this for you is that, and I kind of mentioned it when I walk into a restaurant and I see people my age on their phones, the technology that is out there is starting to blend a lot of this. But Generation Z has paid a lot of attention to the problems that the millennials are having and how the need for communication skills are very important. But one of the things you'll find with almost all Generation Z when they go look for that first job or they go look for a house is they want to give back. So they're going to want to know, is this house eco-friendly? Does it save electricity? You know, how is the trash picked up? All of those types of things. They're looking for their dream job. Not just a job, but a dream job, not a career, necessarily a specific long-term career, because they want career growth. But that ties into their independence, and what we're seeing with Generation Z is we are now getting a tidal wave of young men and women that want to be entrepreneurs. They want to be in charge. They don't want somebody else to tell them what to do, and that also then drives in how you need to communicate with them. The millennials are also seeing this, and they're starting to take that as well. I know when I came out of college and got my first job, I was told what to do. I was never told why. It was, you will do this and you will do it this way, and that's your job. About halfway through my career in the Air Force, we started telling people why to do something. So they had to know what they needed to do and why they needed to do it. But we never explained to them the reason behind it. Well, that's what's important to both millennials and Generation Z today. They need to take ownership of this entire process. They are different, but like I said, things are starting to blend. So Generation Z, they would prefer a cool product. Millennials are looking for the cool experience. So when you're trying to sell a house to someone that wants a cool experience, how are you going to do that? And I'm not a selling expert. I'm a behavioral expert. I'm an expert on soft skills and personal skills. But that's the key thing for you to think about on a regular basis. Every time you talk to somebody, who is this person? What's their age group? What's going to resonate with them? You can get a lot from how they probably found out about you, where they found out about you. But you're starting to see the transition in how people get information. My 26-year-old all the way down to the 16-year-old don't watch TV. Everything is done on their phone, their tablet, or their computer. It's all done streaming. It's all YouTube or Netflix or a host of other things that they look at that I don't even have a clue about, other than I've looked at it and I make sure that it's nothing that's going to harm them. It's none of those types of sites. So we do that, but there's so many different ways that they get information out there. But Generation Y and Generation Z are not only different from my generation, from the baby boomers, but they're a little bit different from each other. So it's important for you to think about that when you're talking to them. Communication skills. So when I came out of college, and then even my first years in the Air Force, email was new. So we did everything on either face-to-face or by the phone. And as you can see, people, and I get a kick out of this because it says number in the workforce, but they're disengaged from technology. My 80-year-old mom is on a computer and her phone more than I am. So this information, take it with a grain of salt because it varies depending on the person, who they come in contact with, what their lifestyle is, who they integrate with. But baby boomers, they started with personal tech, so that was me. Actually, I was right on the border. I was born in 1961, so I can be a baby boomer, I can be a Generation X. Digital immigrants, so Generation X, they are the ones that really started getting it out there. That's when computers started getting out, the first cell phones came out. Not many people in this room remembers the old Motorola brick that I carried when I first had my first phone. Millennials, so they were the first true wave of people that grew up with the internet. So they look at everything differently. And if they want some information, where do they go? They go right to the internet, and that goes back to that fake news piece of why there's so much problems out there and why fake news is actually successful. Because that's where they go, and because they don't have the necessary personal skills to think, hey, this doesn't make sense, they don't do any further research. And then finally, you've got the Generation Z. They're 1% of the workforce, but pretty soon that's going to change. But the millennials are going to be 75% of the workforce by 2020. So right around the corner, they're going to be the milestone. They're going to be the folks that are out there. And not very long from now, we're going to have a president that is from this generation. A lot of Congress now, a lot of the young men and women that are running for Congress are millennials. It's actually very positive because they are embracing a lot of the personal skills, and they've seen the divisiveness in our country that has caused that. And it's the lack of those skills that causes it. When I've already decided what I'm going to say, and I'm having a conversation in Ryan, I don't care what he says. I already know he's wrong because I've already decided. So I'm not even going to pay attention to him. I'm just waiting for him to stop talking, and then I'm going to tell him what I want. And then going back to that false confidence, because they never learned how to deal with conflict, people that could have been friends for years are no longer friends because they have a disagreement, because they don't have the personal skills to be able to have that conversation. But be very careful when you do communicate, because this is important as to how they get their information, right? So we saw in that video, younger generation may or may not be looking at Facebook, but they are looking at all those other things. So if you're going to start marketing on those devices or those platforms, you've got to be very, very careful, because one of the things that millennials and Generation Z do is if you send an unsolicited advertisement, they're going to ignore it. They're going to fast forward. They're going to swipe left. So they have to be searching for it. They have to be looking for it. So that's why I'm excited about that course you guys have in October, because I think you're going to get some great information about how to take advantage of that and not turn them off, if you will, by sending them some information. So hard skills and soft skills. Does everybody know what the difference is? Personal skills. So hard skills, when you go to college, you come out of college or a tech school, or I learned how to fly airplanes, that's a hard skill, right? Personal skills are critical thinking, looking someone in the eye and communicating. I was surprised at a major university in Dallas when I went in and talked to a fraternity, and the young men in that fraternity couldn't shake my hand and look in my eye. And that's what is coming out of our colleges today. And it's because they don't have these skills, because their parents didn't get it from their parents. And as soon as it skips a generation, the only way to bring it back is to actively have a program so that they can learn these skills. So you're dealing with young men and women out there every single day that don't have these skills. And that's important, because if you know that and you're trying to communicate with them, you won't necessarily get frustrated when they're not responding the way that you want them to respond, or getting back to you, or you want to have a phone call and they only want to text. My 18-year-old son, get him on the phone, it's one-word answers. I have a text conversation with him, it can go on for 30 minutes, you know, so that's the huge piece that's out there. So what do? Well, first off, you guys need to make sure you work on your personal skills. Not just your own personal skills, but understanding what those skills are. But what's important here about personal skills, just like leadership or flying an airplane, is you need to work on it every single day. It's a perishable skill. As a leader in the Air Force, I commanded a wing of 2,500 people. I didn't get to that point by reading books. I didn't get to that point by going to a couple classes. I got to that point because I made a lot of mistakes. And I learned from those mistakes, and I took what I learned and I reapplied it, and then I use it every single day. Well, the use of personal skills and these conversation things that you need to do with your potential clients is the same thing. If you don't think about it every day, if you don't do what we call a hot wash, anytime we would go fly a mission, you'd do a hot wash after, and no holds were barred. You could say whatever you wanted, critical. Once you left the room, we went out and had a cocktail, we had a beer, whatever, but everything needed to be said in that room so that you could learn from it. Every time you meet with a client, you should be doing that. Why didn't this work? Or what did I say? Or how did they respond? Because one of the key things that you need to do as part of this behavior is pay attention to them. I talked a little bit with Ryan here about a conversation about how the divisiveness we have today, listening is a lost art in our society. Because people don't listen. They think they do, but what they do is they listen to respond. They already know what they want to say, and they're just waiting for you to stop. One of the most important things that you can do is to listen and pay attention to the body movement and the way that they're going to communicate with you. And then use that as you develop these skills to be able to communicate with them. But it's not selling, not with millennials and not with Generation Z. You need to guide them. I like to call it, you need to date them.
Yes.
How many people like dating? I know I didn't, right? But you have to have personal skills to be able to date, right? Well, you're acting like a counselor. You're acting like somebody that is courting them, like somebody that is dating them, which is totally different than it used to be. May even be different than how you're selling. Again, that's why I'm excited about this course that you guys are having. Advocacy. They need to take you on. They need to see that you're genuine. They need to see that you're their advocate instead of you trying to advertise to them. Okay? And then finally, cliches, not going to work with these young men and women. You've got to have that conversation. That's why the development of personal skills is so important as you have these conversations. But what's even more important is that you need to be authentic and genuine. How many people in here have a why? Okay, we've got one. Okay, Simon Sinek, is that where you got it from? So start with why. He wrote a great book. He's an amazing speaker and author. And he talks about start with why. But if you don't know some things in front of that, it's going to be very, very difficult to make your why happen. How many of you have goals? Okay, so most of you have goals. Do you write them down? Yes. I always say a goal isn't a goal if it's not written down, just like a plan isn't a plan if you don't write it down. But again, if you don't have the authentic piece in front of you, having your why and having your goals, you're going to know what you are, but you're not going to know who you are. Has anybody ever asked you that before? Who are you? Has anybody ever asked you that? What was your answer?
Now I don't know.
Now you don't know?
I'm on the spot now.
Well, so historically, when I was in the Air Force, the last couple years I was in the Air Force, if somebody asked me who I was, I'd say I'm a colonel. I command this wing. I'm married. I have 5 kids. I fly airplanes. I do CrossFit. Is that who I am? No. What is that? What did I just describe? What I do, right? So how do you describe who you are? And why is it important? Who you are the decisions that you make every single day. Those decisions are seen by other people. Them seeing you when you make that decision, that defines your character. And when that defines your character, that defines who you are. So why is that important? Because those decisions that you make every day, your clients are seeing that. If you say one thing and do something else, are you going to be genuine and authentic to that young man or woman? So that's why it's so critical for you to understand how your own decisions influence the clients and how you can help those clients. I go and I speak in schools about the development of these skills, and we go to these young men and women, and I'm baffled because the teacher will stand up in front and say, okay, Colonel Searcy, Mr. Searcy is here today to talk about the development of your personal skills, how to make decisions, how to make this your own, define who you are. So put your phones away and I want you to pay attention. Walks over, sits on a chair, pulls out his phone, and is on his phone for the entire 25 or 30 minutes that I'm talking to his class. What just happened? He did the opposite of what he asked. So millennials and Generation Z, more than any time in our history, that's what they pay attention to. You can say whatever you want, but if the decisions that you make don't show that you're genuine, authentic, and don't show that you mean what you say and that your words match your actions, you're going to lose them. They're going to tune you out. Does that make sense? Yeah. So that's why it's important for you to understand how all this behavior affects everything. So what are some of the takeaways? I already said one of these up front. Home buying or anything today when you work with millennials and Generation Z is like dating. If you kind of look at it like that and then understand where your personal skills are and then do that hot wash so that you can improve every time, you're eventually going to get to a point where you are authentic and you're genuine and they're going to get who you are. When you're communicating with them, pay attention to what works and what doesn't work. And the sad thing is, it's not the same from individual to individual. I can't stand up here and say every single time you communicate, this will work. It won't. So you've got to have a number of tools in your toolbox, and then you use those tools that are necessary when you can. Don't overload them with information. Our programs break the 6 barriers that are out there to teach these skills. One of those barriers is an hour class to a bunch of millennials or Generation Z. They are going to lose their interest in about 15 or 20 minutes. Some say, now that we're in the YouTube in the 90-second to 120-second bites, if you go past that, you're going to start losing them for a couple reasons. A, their attention span, but number 2, if it takes you longer than 2 minutes to explain something to a millennial or a Generation Z, they're going to think it's too complicated. So they're not even going to pay attention. So if you have a lot of information, break it down as you communicate it, and then figure out the best way to communicate with them. There are a number, the percentage is growing every single year. How many people in here have heard of Myers-Briggs personality tests? So you know if you're an introvert or an extrovert, and then there's 16 personality types. What we're finding, because of young men and women on phones all the time, more and more are registering as introverts. And it's not necessarily because they are, but they've never learned the skills and communicated, so they don't even know they have these skills. So if you try to get a millennial or a Generation Z that doesn't like to talk because they're an introvert, you want to have a long conversation with them on the phone, it is not going to work. So that's why paying attention to body language and understanding how they communicate is extremely important. But I will tell you this, and I said it on an earlier slide, don't underestimate them. Millennials and Generation Z, because of the way they can get information, are some of the smartest people on the planet. It's how we communicate with them is what draws that out, and we can take advantage of that. Be genuine, authentic, and relatable, like I said. Understand that these skills are a perishable skill, so you need to work at it. Learn to listen. If you can learn to listen, and not just listen to the words, but pay attention to the behavior. Are they on their phone? Are they looking you in the eye? Do they look like they're interested? You all, everybody in this room, I watched everybody interact when I came in, and I'm watching the interaction here. You're all focused. I can tell right now that you're paying attention. It's very, very easy when you learn how to do that to be able to pull that in and use that as part of your toolbox. Also remember, and this is one of the keys and one of the 6 barriers to being able to develop these skills, is it's a perishable skill. If you think you can read one book, if you think you can go to one class and not do this every single day, then you are not going to become an expert at it. You're not going to be somebody that can walk into a room and be able to date anybody that they need to, because you have the ability to not only communicate, but interact with them. Thank you very much for having me today. Does anybody have any questions? Yes?
So, I know you talked a lot about millennials. Do you think it's easier for millennials to market to fellow millennials, or do you think it is harder because they have the same traits or flaws?
I would say it doesn't matter, provided everybody has the skills. Now, there's a relatable piece there. Now, when I go in and I teach personal skills, if I try to go into an inner city school in Dallas that is multicultural, and I'm a white guy from Illinois or Wisconsin, I may not be the right person in my company to go do that, right? So somebody that's closer to their age or has grown up in that environment is going to be a better fit. So that's important, but I honestly believe if you have the skills and the ability to do this, anybody can relate to anybody. Because that's what's important, showing that you're genuine, showing that you're authentic, and then understanding how to do that communication. Now, do millennials talking to millennials or Generation Z talking to Generation Z have a leg up because you already understand that? Absolutely. But somebody like me that can pay attention to that sometimes can actually do better because I'm not saddled with that same understanding that you have. So I'm looking for all of the other behaviors. So if we both have the same skills, you definitely have a leg up. But if we don't have the same skills, I would have the leg up. So that's why these skills are important.
I'm going to add a comment to that. I've noticed that, especially when you're dealing with money, then millennials get kind of nervous because they don't really know a lot of times what they haven't been told or taught how to manage their money, and so they get nervous when they're talking about it. And so I've seen where I'll be talking to a potential client, say, and then they'll go see somebody who's like my dad's age, 60, 50, 55 to 65, and they'll go with the 55 to 65-year-old because it's like their dad talking to them. And it's not because we shared any different information. It's because they trust him more because he has gray hair. I mean, that's what I perceive.
Were you pointing at me?
Yeah, so here's an example that goes along with that. So
That's where it kind of gets, if you're advertising to them and it's an older person, I think it depends on what you're trying to communicate. If you're trying to communicate experience, then millennial's better. If you're trying to advise and guide, like we were talking about earlier, then I think maybe an older person on the screen, but that's been my experience. That's not necessarily.
well, and part of that is the father figure that you just talked about. So I was talking to the superintendent in Jacksboro ISD last night, and he used to be a football coach. Before he became the superintendent, he was a football coach for 15 years. And he related how many times parents would come up to him and ask him to tell their kids to do something. Because he had the power that the parents didn't have. He could bench that kid, right? That kid is going to do anything that that coach tells him because it's personal to him. It's personal to what he wants, he or she wants. So that coach had the power. So it's kind of like the father figure piece there, but figuring out how to relate to him, that's what's the key. Next question.
I have a question.
Yes.
I feel like millennials kind of sometimes, and I'm grouping myself into this category. Sometimes we don't really know what we want because we want ease of access to information, but we also want local and mom and pop. Like I want to be able to walk into a store if I want to, but I also want that store to have the top-notch website that I can browse through to shop if I want to. And so with that, there's this wide, you can't just take one avenue. You can't be the mom and pop who has a website just to have one, but it isn't really that good. And you also can't be the tech giant who doesn't have a storefront. And so with that wide range of needs in one generation or with one type of person, other than just luck of the draw, how do you be good at all of that without being the best at one part? Because that's what I feel like, what I'm running up against is I want to be this local guy for all these clients, but I also have to, by necessity for the other ones, I have to have this online presence, I have to have all the social media platforms, I have to be consistent with them, I have to have all this sort of stuff, but I also have to be there in person and go to their closing and hold their hand, and that's fine, I get that. It's too much for one person to do. And then once you start putting somebody like on a team, if you start hiring people, then it's not you. And then they lose interest because it's not you calling them, it's your assistant Sally or whoever. So it seems, do you see that going away? Do you see that we're just gonna have to deal with that? Have you noticed with Generation Z that there's anything different about that? Are they just more on the?
Well, you had a comment.
You answered that, like your first sentence was, there's this wide window, so millennials are more of an attitude, I guess, than it is an age group. So if you're looking at them and they walk in and you go, okay, that person's 22, you automatically go, millennial, I'm gonna deal with this because I took a class, I'm gonna deal with this millennial. Where we've kind of found one thing that is helping is just ask them. How do you learn best? How do you want us to help you? And they'll answer it. They're, like you said, they're very honest. They'll answer it real quick.
Well, I think once you have the customer, that's very, I ask that every time.
Ask them right away. That can be the first question.
But then how do you attract, how do you cast that broad net to say, if I'm looking for potential clients, not the ones that I already have, because you're absolutely right. How do you best want me to communicate? That's fine. But when I'm trying to go out and market for other clients, whether it's a realtor trying to find clients to buy a house or me trying to find people to pre-qualify, you have, it seems to me like the net is getting broader and broader and broader that you have to cast in order to find.
Yeah, there's so many different types of people now. When we started dealing with the individuality of each person, instead of saying, you need to conform to this. Now we've got all these individuals, so it is a broad net. But just go ask them. Just walk up to them. I picked up some of my printing yesterday, and I asked the guy, he had a Iraqi hat. And I asked him, what do you know about your VA loan? What do you know about that? A lot of people don't. And so just, that can be, or she's putting out social media stuff, asking, how can we help you? What questions do you have? And I think that's really helpful.
But I think every generation's probably dealt with this as the next generation comes, because like he just said, a 22-year-old. That's not even, that's Gen Z now.
Yep.
A 22-year-old is Z, and like that is now happening to us. That we're going to be in the middle of the crossing of another generation. But I bet every generation's probably had that to deal with the generation.
They have, but technology today offers up so many other ways that you can communicate. So that's kind of the challenge that Ryan talked about. Now that I have so many different ways to communicate and to get information out there, how do I go about that? That's a decision that you're going to have to make, but it's developing all these skills. It's going to the class in October. It's learning the best ways to do that, and then having a balance. For instance, I have a LinkedIn presence, but I'm not on it every day. And I don't do a lot of posts. I do a lot of liking and then a lot of conversations on LinkedIn. Facebook, I'm on Facebook, but I'm just sharing some information, but I'm paying more attention to what's going on than I am contributing. And I'm identifying people that I want to talk to selectively that fall into the area that's important to me to solve the problem that I see that is out there. So that goes back to having the personal skills so that you can think critically and to solve the problems and then determine for yourself what the right way forward is.
And I also think that a lot of it is having to, it's going to be a slower sales cycle, if that makes sense.
Correct.
We're not able to say, hey, come meet me at the office, or I'm going to take a loan app, it's going to take me 20 minutes. Sometimes 20 minutes is like, oh, hell, I don't have time for 20 minutes.
Yes.
Like, they don't think that way. So to me, it's how do you figure out how to get them this important information, because we're talking about buying a home. We're talking about something that's a big purchase. They're not good with finances. They don't, so it's going to be education, guidance, things like that we're really not used to, because we're used to someone that says, oh yeah, I'll come meet you, or I'll give you this information. You know, trying to get docs to verify income is like freaking pulling teeth, because they just, that's a totally foreign like concept to them. And so I do think it just takes time.
It doesn't fit into their narrative. It doesn't
Exactly.
fit into their narrative. I've got people that I talk to in those age groups that I'll send them an email and I don't get anything. I send them an email, I don't get anything. I text them, right back I get something. So if I want them to look at a website or if I want them to look at a document, I don't put that in an email, it goes into the text. You know, so those are all the different things that you have to think about, but that's one person. The next person is going to be totally different. The next person is going to be totally different. So that's why the development of these skills is so important, and the fact that you remember that they're perishable and you're going to learn, you're going to make mistakes, but that's how we learn. That's how we grow.
Can I add to that too? They'll always rebuttal back, because they'll say, well, this internet site says this or whatever, and you're always constantly having to rebuttal, and you have to give them the link where you got it from and say, pay attention to this source. You may have to look further for that, and not just the first one, because advertisers just pay for the first part. So that's what you have to also do.
Yeah, and I think Ryan hit on a really good point in when you made the comment about they go to the guy with gray hair. Millennials want to stay independent, but they always go for advice. They always ask advice. So if you can create yourself to be the person with the information and have it out there, like, I'm a resource. I think that would be a great way to attract.
Absolutely. So that goes back to being the advocate. You're their advocate. You're providing them information because what they're looking for is they want to figure it out on their own. So when I was younger, let me put it that way. I can't necessarily speak for all of y'all. But when I was younger, if somebody told me something back then that wasn't fake news, and if it was my dad or a coach or somebody, that was information. I took it, put it as part of my toolbox. Millennials and Generation Z, when you give them information, if they don't take ownership of that, it means nothing to them. So that's why being their advocate and giving them 5 or 6 different sites to go look at so they can see that there's different opinions. And what you're also then allowing them to do is to develop some personal skills. Now they got to take a look at all this and they got to try and figure it out. And if you make yourself that advocate, they're going to come back to you and get your opinion on that.
I also noticed that when you do that, you show them that you're confident in your product.
Absolutely.
Whether that's you saying, go interview more realtors or go interview more lenders. I had a guy he said, are all the rates the same at every lender? I said, no. Here's 3 other lenders if you want to go look at them. I mean, because you have to be open to that. And he didn't talk to one of them. Not one of them. He's like, he called me back the next day and said, okay, what do I need to do to apply? I said, well, did you call around? He said, nah, they don't want to mess with it. That's what he said.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, well, good. I gave you those. So, but, I think that it goes along to showing you're confident in your product, and so they say to themselves, well, if he's confident, then I guess, and he knows what he's doing, hopefully, then I'll be confident.
Yes.
I can't see you, Kami, but I wanted to add on to what Kami said, and part of what you said too. My comment was just in regards to the relatable factor, and maybe being able to voice a little bit about your own experience and putting your own experience in there. So then it is more of these are my credentials, right? And just because I don't have the gray hair doesn't mean I've not bought and purchased, several of my own homes, and even providing, your most recent experience with the build. I found in my experience anyways that has been helpful, because you're kind of on the same token, you're stating your credentials and speaking to your experience, but you're also offering the guidance to them in the way that's more of, here are some sites that I found helpful when I was, in this position.
What's a critical piece that has to be in front of that? You need to listen first, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So what you see all too often with people out there that are doing advertising and they're doing selling and they're not guiding and being an advocate is they already know what they're going to say. They've got their elevator pitch or they've got their pitch, and that's what they lead with, instead of, how can I help you? Tell me about yourself. Tell me what you need. You start listening. Now you've got all these things in your toolbox, and now you choose which of my experiences applies to this.
Right.
Even more so, we all know parents. We all know uncles, aunts, brothers, sisters that have had experiences. So it doesn't have to necessarily be yours.
Right.
And that's even more powerful sometimes, because that shows that it's not just about you, it's about all the people that you are in contact with and how experienced you are dealing with all these different people.
Right.
Absolutely. That's a great input. That's a great input. Anybody else? Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.